All right, welcome everyone. We're excited to have you all here for our third STAR virtual professional development session. This session today is going to focus on agriculture mechanics subjects. We've got four outstanding teachers that are going to talk to you about a good variety of subjects. And so I'm really excited to learn from them, as I'm sure we all are. A couple of quick notes I wanted to share with everyone before we hand it off to our first presenter. Number one, you all should be muted except for the presenter, and that'll kind of help keep some outside noise down. If you have some specific questions you'd like to send, please try to use the chat feature for that, and you can make it to where everyone can see your question, or you can send it directly to that presenter and they can respond at a later time after they're done presenting. Also, the second thing I wanted to say is if there's time at the end, we will open it up, and if the teachers are willing, we can have a more casual question and answer session for those that want to open up and discuss things a little bit deeper, because we know time is pretty tight in this. Other than that, I do want to remind everybody this video is being recorded, and the recording has started, and we're going to make that available to all of you that have registered, and then it's also later on going to be put on a YouTube channel that Oklahoma Ag teachers can access and refer back to. In addition to that, I'm going to, here in just a moment in the chat for everyone, I'm going to drop a link to a Google Drive folder. Most of the teachers have shared with me their presentation and other resources, so you can all click on that link and access those. And that's the same folder that we're going to put this video on. And so you'll have access to all of this information, can refer back to it after the session is over. At the conclusion of the session, you're going to have the opportunity to respond to a quick survey just to evaluate how you thought things went and help us as a group on the STAR committee make improvements going forward for all these virtual professional developments. And that's something that will really help us out. Lastly, don't forget, we still have 3 more sessions that we're offering, all of which are next week. Monday is our next session. It's going to be at 1 p.m. And that's the Q&A session for new teachers, pre-service teachers. Even if you've got a lot of experience and you want to learn from that panel, we invite you to join in on that. And the registration information will also be included in the link that I share with all of you. So with all of that being said, our first presenter is Ms. Katie Smith from Oologah, and she's going to talk to us about a really cool method that she uses in the shop to get students started. And so I'm going to mute myself and hand it off to you, Katie.
Thank you. Well, I got to start off that this is not an original idea. I actually have taken this idea from Mr. Cook at Jinx. He came to our new teacher meetings 6 years ago and told us it's something that he did every year. And it has been an awesome addition to the shop program here at Oologah. So what is the project? The project is actually a final project for the first semester. And so what I do is I put kids into teams of 3 and 4, depending on how big the class is that year. And what they do is they have to design and fabricate a metal boat. And so then at the end of the project, they not only get graded on how well their design was and their welds and how they work together as a team, but they also get to actually float the boat we just go borrow a stock tank from the feed store up the road and we float it in the shop. There's a couple rules that we have. Everyone on the team has to cut metal and has to weld. Can't just have one kid doing one part of it. They are only allowed 1 sheet of metal. No grinders are allowed, and they can only stick weld. And then here's a list of the materials. So they have their 1 4x8 sheet of metal, the 2 types of rods we keep on hand here in the shop. And then they can access any of the hand tools that they want out of the tool room. They just can't use the grinder. And then they can use the plasma cutter or the torch. Naturally, they all gravitate to the plasma cutter. So here is a few pictures of some designs that have been over the years. So I give them total freedom on that. They have to be able to draw it all out, submit that. That's like their first grade for the assignment. They draw it out and have to tell me how big each piece is. An addition that we've added on throughout the years is I've had them use some scrap stuff to make handles, because when they sink in the water, sometimes they're a little difficult to get out. So we add horseshoes onto there some way, or like a scrap piece of 1-by-1 inch tubing. And I'll apologize if you hear a weird noise here in a minute. They keep testing something in the high school and it comes over the intercom. Um, so here is the stock tank that we borrow every year. They just let us come up, get it. We just clean it out really good. We have got some of the old weights from the weight room that we use to test that. So we have about 250 pounds worth of like free weights. But then we also usually have a volunteer that wants to bring their waders and get in and stack it. And as you can see, if it holds enough weight, then they get in there as well. I think the record we've had is one that holds 500 pounds before it actually sinks. There is a little bit, they get some bonus points if they get a little creative with it. I only give them 2 weeks, and sometimes it takes them all of that 2 weeks to get it done, depending on how efficient they are. So like I said, these are just a few of the designs that we've had. There's been some really successful ones, and then there's some really awful ones, like a pontoon design somebody tried to make one year. So it's pretty short and simple. It's just what we use for the end of the year or end of the semester, where they have learned all the basics and they kind of apply that at the end of the semester before we go on making other projects. So is there any questions?
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Smith? We're going to go ahead and at this point, that was awesome. That's such a cool, and I like the pictures. The students, you can clearly see, are having a good time with this. And so that's something that's really creative. I think that would be exciting for any class. We're going to go ahead and transition to our next presenter. And then as we finish up, if there's things that come to your mind, either send those through the chat as far as questions, or make sure and reach out to those teachers at the end as well. And so great. Our next presenter is Michael Gustafson from Moore, and he's going to talk to you about a subject I think is something that's maybe underrepresented in some of the things that we talk about. So I'm excited to hear from him in that regard. But if you have any questions, make sure and continue to use the chat for that. And so you can see there's a first question there from Mr. Coulter. So I'll let you respond to that, Katie, but we'll hand it off to Mr. Gustafson right now.
Mason, can you share my PowerPoint there? Having difficulty trying to get mine.
Yes, I will. I'll share it through the chat.
Okay. Sorry. Hey, wanted to just give you an idea of something else to kind of do, this survey CDE thing that's been kind of taking place. There's been some time where there's some really good components in this, and can you guys hear me okay? All right, Max.
Gus, your video is lagging pretty bad, actually. Your screen is frozen for me. I don't know if that's how it is for everyone else.
Mason.
I can hear you now, but it's still kind of slow, poor quality on the video audio.
Okay. Sorry, we've got a brand new technology here. How about now?
I can see you now. Let's try it again, and then if we have to, we might move you back if it persists again. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Anyway, this survey CDE thing, it's kind of kicked off. Good deal, thumbs up. It just kind of sparked some interest in me a couple of years back, and I can't tell you how many things in my career now that I've built in terms of buildings. You've got to know slope and different things like that, and so it's really taken some interest in me. Also on a national level, when you think about the Ag Mechanics contest, it's a comprehensive contest. So you've got to know the components of this. It's called the Soil and Water Conservation Contest. technically survey, electricity, as well as ag mechanics, and then I think you've got to read a great big thick John Deere manual. And Kenny can probably go ahead and tell us about that. But that's my understanding, is that that's where we are with our ag mechanics contest at the national level. So I kind of came up with this title. I thought it was good because as teachers, we are continually trying to do things and evolve and learn about things. And here was something that I picked up about 3 years ago. Thought I'd try to dive into. I'm not an expert by no means. I can answer some questions for you guys. If you've got questions, I put my email on this last slide that we can look at. But wanted to kind of go over some things. The first slide there is going to talk about the 4 components that are a part of this contest. And so there's a lot of mathematics stuff that's involved. So as you go through, there's a whole bunch of math that you've got to teach those kids. The first thing that we look at is pace factor. And so the easiest thing to do is go mark off 100 feet there by your shop, in your shop, or whatever, and then have those kids pace it. Try to get an average of 2 or 3 different trips. They take that 100 feet and divide it by the number of steps, and that comes up with their pace factor. So the people that are actually walking around, kind of looking silly, stretching out their legs, trying to figure out how many feet, there's an actual thing. It's called the pace factor. And so last year it was an important component, or maybe 2 years ago it was an important component in the actual ag mechanics contest. And since we started introducing that to our kids, we taught everybody one of those or all these components. And so it was actually beneficial for our students that were competitive there. So you don't need anything necessarily. There's 100-foot tape. I don't know if you can switch back, Mason, and just show you guys what just go to Lowe's or Home Depot or your hardware store and just get you 100-foot tape. And on the back of that 100-foot tape, it gives stuff and gives your measurements in tenths. And so that's an important part and component of that contest. Instead of just inches and feet, it does it in tenths. The second thing there is the Abney hand level, and it's actually a really small, kind of neat level that you look through. It kind of looks like a little scope. Once you get it to where it's in a leveling area, you can start to see a bubble in there, and that gives you an idea. And this used to be used to get some quick estimations or slope adjustments for people on job sites. So that's one of the things that we use as an Abney hand level. Horizontal leveling, you use a plumb bob, and then you've got your 100-foot tape, and they give you some dimensions to kind of look at that. You pull your tape out as far as there's a mark on the ground. Pull that tape out and put your plumb bob there, and then you've got to write a measurement down there as well. And the last thing kind of gets more difficult. You need a tripod, transit, and then some rods for differential leveling. And this is where there's a great big component of math. You've got to figure out your elevation with different points throughout the field that's there. Lastly, the next slide there has just got some resources on there that I use. There's the Green Ag Mechanics CIMC book. There's chapters, units 11 and 12, talk about surveying, land surveying, and this soil and water conservation components. You've got to be able to pinpoint exact locations and acres and feet and those kind of things at some of the contests that we've attended. Obviously, go to your guidelines there at OKFFA on the CDE deal and pull those things up, and you can kind of look at that. Now, once I started to try to develop and come up with all the equipment that we needed, I asked multiple people in the construction world here in Oklahoma, where do you find these things? Where do I find an Abney hand level? Where do I find the transits that's going to work? Where do I get rods that are going to be able to be utilized for my students to use these pieces of equipment for this contest? Nobody in the greater Oklahoma City area or Tulsa that I know of has actually got these different pieces. So I had to actually order them from a forestry supply in Mississippi. It's called Forestry Supply Company. You can go in there and pull up their website, go in there and find the things that you need. And if you want more information on the things that you'd like to have, I can give you the breakdown of the things and the different item numbers and orders that I purchased to be able to get these things. But it's really fun. I never, like I said, a lot of us maybe spend some time in certain areas. Livestock judging at the state level, there's usually 60 teams. There's usually probably 8 to 10 teams that are involved with this soil and water conservation. There's some really great resources in terms of ag teachers across the state, the ones that I've talked to, like Bart Harper, Sherman Cox. Those guys are willing to help put in some hours and teach people and train people of a really great contest that we have going on. So anyway, that's just kind of my take on things. But don't know if you got more specific questions, you're welcome to shoot me an email. And I could probably, there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of math. There's a lot of different components to go into that. But I'd be glad to share my information that I have on that. I've got some examples. I don't know if that helps you
Yeah,
guys.
you've got time, Gus, if you want to show a couple of quick examples.
Okay, so this rod that I'm holding here, and I'm gonna use Bart Harper as a reference. Bart said, "Hey, grab when you get ready to go buy these, go buy a bunch of these 8-foot rods. They're a little less bulky to maybe manipulate when you're getting when you're practicing with your students in class or after class or whatever. These 8-foot rods are really, really short. If you can see, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to zoom this in, but if you can see each one of these marks represent, once you get to, you know, your big red number here, that's your 7-foot mark. Each one of the marks that come up here, the first little mark there, the bottom part of that is a 10th. And then the top part of that is another 10th. So if we're going to actually mark this thing and look through our stadia and our transit, and we're looking at this little mark right here above the 7, it's going to be 7 foot 4/10. Okay, kind of right here where I'll put my pin there. So like right here would be, you know, 7 foot 4/10, and that would be the answer that you would actually mark on there for your students. Okay, so when you go to doing all those different formulas and putting things in there, that would be an important piece to be able to have. This is that Abney hand level that we were talking about earlier. You look through it, looks like one of those kaleidoscope kind of things, but once you look through there, there's a level, there's a bubble on the side. You get it kind of about right in the middle where the other stadia is at, and then, you know, give an estimate looking through that to the rods to get your measurement. Plumb bob usually comes in a package with your transits nowadays. Basically just tie a little string on it, dangle it, wait till it stops moving, and that's when you're going to make your estimation on what those are going to look like. And then I've set up a transit here. One of the neat things about this, or one of the things that you want to make sure you do if you've never used one of these, is they all have a level on them. And maybe you can see that one right there. You want to make sure when you set this up for students that you level it 2 ways. So I'm going to level it that way, and then I'm going to level it this way. So I'm going to make sure in that I'm going to change that and make that level as well. So it's level in all directions that you're pointing to be able to get your measurements. So just food for thought as you move forward with that. The other thing, like there was 100-foot tape. You can get one of these, and usually on the white side, it gives you your tenths. So I guess if you're starting to look at that.
Did we lose you, Gus? You're frozen?
Looking forward and
yeah, there we go.
Contest. So anyway, a great little contest. Like I said, very little participation, but lots of things I feel like students probably ought to know as they move on and graduate high school. You're going to build something at some point, pour some concrete for a foundation. So just great things to be able to save yourself some money. And I'd like to throw this little nugget out there too. Trying to get somebody to survey your land in this area, it's about $350 for a half an hour of their time. It really takes them about 25 minutes to set up things now. They don't even use this equipment today. They've got theodolites and different things that are used. So anyway, about 30 minutes they can figure out all the figures that you would need for your property and building your foundations and stuff. So.
Well, that's great. I want to say the examples that you provided, the point that you made about this being kind of an untapped area in terms of the CDE, I would love to see us grow this contest. It's something that just in the use of technology, the skills that they learn, how to take these types of measurements, you hear more and more about the incorporation of STEM and all of the skills that these students are receiving. This is really, really critical. And so I think, when you're teaching ag mechanics curriculum, our mind immediately goes towards metals and welding, but we need to make sure and realize that there's a lot of interest that some students have that this will be a way to grab them. And if there's a way for a young teacher or a teacher that wants to kind of explore and expand into a new area and also maybe get some recognition for their students, this is a great opportunity for everyone to kind of look into. What I also like is that you mentioned some names, including yourself. A lot of people are hesitant to ask about things that have a competition component to it, but it's been my experience that we know that teachers, even some of the best ones, they may not give you every secret, but they're going to give you everything they can that they know to get you started. And that's how I've been able to join in on a lot of events and really benefit from that. And so I encourage everyone, if you want to dig deeper in this event, don't hesitate to reach out to Gus. He's going to get you help to get you started. And then, like he said, he's mentioned some of the other names like Bart Harper, Medill. And so, don't be afraid to ask questions. And so is there any other questions? We've got still a good amount of time. We're ahead of schedule. Is there any other questions from anybody in the Zoom meeting right now for either presenter?
If I could add, Mason,
Yes,
I think I've been real impressed with the STAR program that we do, and I've made some comments to a few people like, basically this is an opportunity for us to take care of our own. We can strengthen ourselves as Oklahoma Ag educators and on a state level and try to help ourselves progress on a national level if we so choose to, and it's almost kind of family oriented. And the day of the contest, now we're all going to disagree and be on different teams and try to be rooting for ourselves, but at the end of the day, if we're not trying to help each other out and strengthen ourselves as a profession, then I think we're doing ourselves a big disservice. And so I applaud you for taking on the STAR deal and doing that, and maybe we should further do some more events like this in the future.
You bet. We definitely hope to grow this and hopefully get to a point where we can do a lot of this in person as well. So that's something that's definitely on our radar. So any other questions for the presenters that have gone so far? If you have some, you can submit those through the chat, but at this point, we're going to go ahead and transition to our third presenter today. And he is Rick Dillinger, who is the ag teacher at Elk City. And he's going to talk about some things that I think are really useful to all of us in regards to getting started and managing and taking over a ag mechanics lab or a shop or any kind of workspace where you're going to be doing those kinds of things. And so, Rick, I'm going to hand it off to you. You can start trying to share your screen, and I'll go ahead and go on mute. Let me know if you have any issues.
Okay, thank you, Mason. Just before I get started, I want to reiterate, Michael Gustafson has helped several ag teachers. He's helped me with home site judging, land judging, and he's not just talking to you, he will help you. And that's the key to young teachers. You just got to reach out, and we'll help no matter what. Everybody has their own specialties and things like that, and they're willing to share. So if you can in your professional career, just reach out to get better because no one knows to help you if you don't speak up. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Usually my wife, she's my teaching partner, is the technology guru for me. So I'm going to do the best I can here. Okay, can everyone see that? All right. The things I wish I knew when I started teaching, this is my 24th year of teaching. Most of it I've taught in Texas, Arkansas, and now Oklahoma. And every year things change, and so you're always adapting. But these are some things I needed to know when I was first getting started, and I didn't know to ask, and no one really told me. And so some of the things that I needed to know as far as spending money. Most of us have two different forms. We have our school 412 budget, and we have our activity fund, which is our FFA accounts. A main thing that you can do to help yourself for the long term is always develop a good working relationship with your financial accounts person or persons. If you're in a bigger school, it's going to be more than one. If you're in a small school, that person does a multitude of things. So always have a good relationship and try not to ever put them in a bind where they have to sacrifice you over them. So always try to know the rules, because every spending rule is different in each district. I know coming from a Class B school to a Class 4A school, our auditors are way different. Spending is way different. And so you ask the rules, how do I spend money? What do you expect of me? Just find out those guidelines with that person and keep a good relationship, an open relationship with them, and you'll do fine over your teaching career. I think the second thing I wish someone would have told me is always get a quote first and have a purchase order number before you buy or receive anything. The worst thing you can have happen to you is you buy something, charge something at the local hardware store, and you don't have a PO, and then you want it paid for, and the financial person says, no, we're not going to pay for that because you didn't get a PO. Always have a PO in your hand, whether it's activity fund or 412. Make sure you always have a PO and save yourself from getting in trouble. If you take care of your money, your financial person is going to take care of you. Third thing, keep an accurate record of your spending. You never overspend your 412 money, and you don't want to underspend it. You want to spend 99.9% of that if your school allows you to have it. Spend that 412 fund, because when you apply for a Career Tech grant, that's one of the things on the rubric is you want to spend 80% or greater. And so our district, they let us have our 412 money. They do cover our fuel when we had to travel, but we use that 412 money for going to conferences, to livestock events, to judging contests. And so we try to spend that equally amongst the two teachers we have. Our FFA account, we raise all the money for that. And how to designate spending between the two. If it involves a kid, we do it FFA. If it involves a classroom, we spend 412. And that's kind of our general rule with my teaching partner, which is my wife, and we kind of work it that way. So we want to do something like that. If I want a special piece of equipment, my wife and I have worked really hard here at Elk City, and we apply for grants. She's better at it than I am, but we both try hard, and we try to get grants. We've got new welding machines because of the Career Tech grant. We have a new greenhouse because of the Career Tech grant. And so we work for trying to get as many grants as possible. That gives you a little more flexibility financially if you have those grants. One thing that I have found that saves me a lot of money as far as welding consumables is the Lincoln Electric portal. And there's 5 reps in Oklahoma as far as Lincoln Electric is concerned, and each region has their own rep. And so you can go to lincolnelectric.com and then find your rep, and they can help you get your portal set up. Just remember, though, if you order welding rods through them, which you're paying at cost, you don't pay they're not making any money. I think I pay $1.25 a pound for welding rods, and I think $1.44 a pound for welding wire. And it is fully, it's just at cost. And so I get that, but you have to remember those are considered hazardous materials. And so you got to add in an extra component in the shipping for hazardous material costs. Lincoln, the portal doesn't tell you that, but when you get your bill, it'll be on there. So you kind of have to understand to add that in. And one thing for my students, if a student wants to build something, we buy the materials out of activity fund, and then they reimburse the activity fund. If we build something for a community member, we buy it out of activity fund, and they reimburse the activity fund, because that's what our auditors expect. I would caution you, if you're going to build something for the community, you need to make sure that you are clear with them when you do it. And that transitions to another slide later on. I'm going to go next to tool room management. Now, this has always been a issue. I've tried several different styles, and this is just the one that works for me. And you try to train those students to do it. But each student who's enrolled in Ag Mechanics course, they have to serve 1 week each semester in the tool room. They hand out and receive tools on a sign-out sheet, and they get a test grade for each day they're in there. I don't know how your schools are, but we have to have 2 grades a week. We do like a hands-on participation grade. We have a test grade, and then we have an AET grade with our program. So those kids are in there. They're not goofing off. It's not easy. They've got to clean the tool room. There's a set of rules that I have for it. and they got to maintain the signature sheet. It also tells if a student hands a tool in and it's broken, I know who broke it, and we work on that. When a student signs them out, it teaches them accountability, which is number 2 here on my slide. And it talks about equipment maintenance. There's a right way and a wrong way to use every tool, and every tool has a specific job. And so when they learn to use the correct tools for the correct job, they learn to become more accountable, and they take care of it. So if a student breaks one, they don't hide it from me. They're not penalized from hiding it. They just know that, hey, you've got to sell a few sticks of sausage to help replace this tool, and it's no big deal. It's not a shouting match, or they don't get detention, but they know we're going to have to replace it. And we use activity funds to replace some of those tools. One thing I've learned for tool room management, quality power tools are essential. I've tried to be cheap and use Harbor Freight grinders before, or a low-cost grinder at a discount store. You're going to buy more of those than you would just buying a quality one up front. Circular saws, anything. Buy a quality power tools because they'll last longer for that. But the things I do kind of compromise on are like sockets and wrenches. And I'll go to a Harbor Freight or a discount store, and I'll buy them cheaper because they're gonna lose them, or they're gonna break them, or they're gonna slip them in their backpack. That's just part of it. And on those things, I use some 412 money to replace some of those. But you can compromise on some things, but as far as the power tools, it's just hard to compromise because when you do, you just spend more money than you need to. And it's all about trying to balance your budget and make it last the whole 10 months of the school year. Number 4, keep a digital inventory each year and purchase broken or lost items. If you have a digital inventory and you keep like when you bought it and what funds you bought it with, it helps you to plan ahead. And in the summertime, a lot of superintendents, well, what are you doing with your 12 months? Well, this is what I do in July. I'm going through and I'm checking tool room, and I'm replacing tools, or I'm fixing equipment, or I'm putting new liners and MIG gun liners, and I'm just doing things in July that a lot of people don't see, but my superintendent, my principal can see that I'm trying to repair equipment. My next slide will be safe work habits. This is one that I've struggled with over the years because I get antsy, or I say, well, I don't have enough time. Well, I've learned in my older age that you always have time to protect yourself. And if I want my students to wear PPE and be safe, I've got to wear it. So it's kind of a lead by example. And I wear it when no one's looking, because you never know who's going to walk in on you. And if you've got it on, that it's kind of a mental trigger that, hey, this is correct. And I don't know about you guys, but when Mr. Murray visits our school, he's looking for that signage. It's in our program checklist. And so we have all our proper signage up, and we wear the proper PPE wherever we are. If we're handling chemical, we have chemical goggles. If we're mixing paint, we have chemical goggles, things like that, when we're painting trailers and deer stands and things like that. Number 2, students wear the PPE if you do, and you have to expect them to. So when they walk through that door, you have yours on, they need to get theirs on. And it's just that's part of a shop grade for me, is that PPE is a big thing. It's a big component percentage wise of their daily shop grade, is having their PPE on. Number 3, I use 412 money to buy quality and affordable PPE for the students. They don't like the clear safety glasses because they want to look cool and all that, but clear is better in our shop lighting because sometimes it's dark in corners. And so I buy a good brand. Jackson is the brand I buy for safety glasses. And we buy their glasses, their gloves, their welding caps on the first round. If they lose or tear it up or something happens to it, then they have to buy a new one. And I implemented a work it off program for students who are at risk, so they don't, they may not have the money physically to give to you, but here's your second pair. You owe me so much time after school or during lunch, and we'll work this off. Number 4, and this is going to teaching, take your time to demonstrate proper work techniques rather than just rushing through something. If you're going to teach them how to take meal scale off a piece of metal, show them how to clamp it down correctly, show them how to use the grinder. My students know we don't take guards off of grinders just because they can eat you up. If their accidents do happen, but if a guard's there, it's less likely to happen. So take the time, teach them how to do it correctly. There's no deadline worth risking your safety or a teaching opportunity. And no one is bulletproof. Everybody can have an accident. These are just some things that when I was teaching and I was young and hard-headed, I wish somebody would have told me a long time ago. And on my last slide here, conclusion, if you take great care of your finances and classroom teaching opportunities, your job will take care of you. Number 2, manage your inventory well, make the budget last as long as possible. Number 3, building outside projects can gain or lose community support if the communication or expectations are not agreed upon. There are some community members that I've dealt with in the past that they wanted something expensive, built cheap, and I have to tell them, listen, these are students, they're not professionals. And so, if you're expecting a pro-style job, this is not going to happen. So that's just part of it. They need to understand that. And they need to understand, hey, you may only have them 45 minutes a day. You're not going to whip this thing out in a month. It may take the whole school year to build. So you got to, when you take on an outside project, make sure that it fits your expertise level and the student's expertise level, because it can make or break you sometimes. You're not going to build your program in 10 months, so take it easy. Pace yourself. The worst thing that you can do is try to go too fast and burn yourself out, because we need you in our profession. We need you to replace some of us guys that are getting older. So pace yourself a little bit. Number 5, this is one that I wish I'd have learned a long time ago. If you have a question, ask an experienced teacher. We want to help you, but we don't know if you don't ask. And there are no stupid questions when you're teaching students. Any questions are great. We want to help you, but we don't know if you don't ask. And so feel free to contact us, things of that nature. Do what you can to get some help and stay in this profession. Number 6, stay safe at all times. You can't teach if you're not there because of injury or stupidity. So try to maintain a safe teaching attitude when you're at work and do good things. Even, anywhere you go, when your students are involved, make sure you maintain a safe attitude. And that's kind of all I've got right now.
That's a lot of really good, useful information from Mr. Dillinger. I really appreciate that. We've got a little bit of time. We're a bit ahead of schedule. At this point, is there any specific questions for Mr. Dillinger or any of our panelists at this moment? Rick, one thing I was going to ask, you did mention about community outside projects, and this could be you, and I'd be interested in anybody's response to this, but that's something that we've known about commonly that's done, especially in some smaller communities where it's not uncommon for anyone in the community to bring something for either to be repaired or to fabricate completely. Is there anything you guys, for best management practices, do you have any kind of a on paper agreement, or what's a suggestion on how to handle that to make sure, especially if you're a new teacher in a new program and you're just getting to know these folks, to make sure you protect yourself, and what do you agree on as far as the cost and who covers expenses and working some of those things out?
When I meet with someone, I sit down and we talk about what they're wanting. I do a quote as far as the bill of materials, and then I tell them it's a 10% donation to our chapter on top of the material cost. And then I tell them, I have this set of students for 46 minutes a day. It's going to take 6 to 8 months to build with that time schedule. And then if we want to show it at a project show, we get the right to show that before we pass that on. As far as that go, one of the questions was asked, how do we keep a digital inventory? I use Google Forms. Our district curriculum coordinator, we have a set deal across our district, same form for everybody. So we just keep ours on a Google spreadsheet, and we can update that every year when we buy a piece of equipment. As far as they need that for insurance, so if you had a fire in your building, it could be replaced, if you have it on those insurance forms. So I always try to update that digital inventory. Another question I just saw is how you sterilize PPE. I give mine to my students. They're to keep up with it. They have a locker in our shop. They lock it up, and we provide cleaning wipes for the glasses. We provide hand soap and towels in our wash bay. But with the new virus situation, we're trying to I have a sterilizing safety glass cabinet, but since I give it to them individually, I don't know how we're going to have to come up with some new ideas as far as sterilizing equipment on some things like that. But this is a new era for everyone. So I really struggled in the spring teaching ag mechanics digitally. And so I've been doing a lot of ICV preparation, trying to get ready for that. But it's pretty difficult because I'm pretty old school as far as learning how to do things. And I like to put my hands on it. It's hard for me to just explain it.
That's a question I will say that I was going to bring up maybe at the end after Kenny goes. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't try at least have a conversation about virtual instruction and what that might look like. So let's put a pin in that for sure and be able to talk about that. But Rick, I would say I appreciate, the things that I take away is you talk about in the shop, you can teach integrity, accountability, responsibility, all while teaching the in context skills. And that's something that anyone that's taught ag mechanics curriculum knows. And so it's just such a great learning area to go with. And I will reiterate, make sure you all that are in this group reach out to these presenters and know that that's a big part of what this is. It's to identify some leaders in our areas that you can reach out to, and they're expressing that they want to help you. And so that's important. But thank you for all that useful information. They covered a lot. And so that was really, really good. At this point, we're still a little ahead of time, but I'm going to go ahead. We do have some questions. Keep sending those through the chat, and some of y'all can respond. Even those of you that have already presented, you feel free to provide your input through the chat. But we're going to go ahead and hand it off to Mr. Leatherwood, Kenny Leatherwood from Edmond, someone that's going to talk to, again, some good smart start type information, ways in which he's got a lot of students started in the shop, let them get to where they're feeling comfortable, and he's going to go over a lot of good points. And so we're looking forward to that. So Kenny, you can go ahead and take it away.
Well, I obviously come up with that title, Smart Start, but I sure am intimidated by one last here by following these younger teachers. I've been doing this for 34 years, and like Gus said earlier, you're never too old to learn something new. And just listening to these three, I've already learned some things, and kind of plan on putting some of those things that I've learned into place. I'll tell you a little bit about our program. For those of you that don't know, I see some faces on there that do know, but I've been teaching here at Edmond for 25 years. And for the last 10 years, I've been strictly teaching in the shop. And so that has been a little bit of a challenge for me, simply because I've had to figure out ways to keep students busy the whole time. And plus, whenever they put in some of our new technology in this building, I've got 3 cameras out in my shop watching me all day long. And so I have to be a little bit on task too, because my superintendent can look in on me anytime he'd like to and see what's going on in my shop. And that goes back to some of the things that Rick said earlier about setting a good example. One of the things that I try to do, like he said, is wear the proper PPEs and things like that in the shop as an example for my students. And I think all my students would tell you that that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time harping on, and make sure that they follow those guidelines and that they stay as safe as they possibly can in the shop. The reason why is, like I said, I teach strictly ag mechanics. And so that means I've got 4 classes, 2 sections of intro, and then 2 sections of ag power and structures. And so, and with our program here, the reason why I started that is because of the interest that we had in ag mechanics. And every one of my classes are maxed out. I've got 15 students in each class. And I'm here to tell you, some of you may have more than that in your classes, but keeping 15 busy all hour long is a task in itself. And so I have to figure out a way to keep them busy. And, one thing about my program is we're not big project builders. As far as when I say big projects, I mean building large projects. Number one, we don't have the space. And number two, we've just got the students wall to wall in here all hour long. And I am of the opinion in the past, back whenever I was teaching smaller classes, I would have a couple building large projects and the rest of them around doing nothing. And so that's why I kind of modified my classes to where we just do a lot of small projects, things that they can do themselves and take home quickly, and it doesn't cost them a lot of money. Whenever I was approached to share something on here today, I thought, what would I share that would be beneficial for anybody? Because I certainly don't have anything new and innovative or anything like that. I try to keep my stuff to the basics. And Rick, if you're still there, I can tell you that what I'm going to talk about was motivated a little bit by you. You and I was in a workshop together a few years ago, and you had made mention about some things, and that made me think about how it could help my students get started in the shop quicker. Whenever I say that, I'm talking about welding. It seems like whenever I first started in the shop, it was just, I was forever teaching my students how to MIG weld or arc weld. And seems like I was just yelling at them all the time to watch the puddle, watch the puddle, watch the puddle. And they just never could get that concept. And so Rick made a comment to a few of us about how to get the students to pay attention to what's going on in the welding process. And so I thought, I always wanted to teach oxyacetylene welding. And Randy Coulter, you can remember back in our day with Cook that we learned oxyacetylene weld. And I think that's something that isn't taught that much anymore. And so whenever I started thinking about what I could do to get the students to understand the fusion process and things like that, oxyacetylene was the best way to do that. And so whenever I first tried that because I used to just start right out in the shop and give them a welding helmet and send them to a welder and tell them to get started. And you could hear students being really frustrated because they just didn't know how to strike an arc. Whenever they did, it just looked like a gob of mess whenever they're done. And they still didn't understand the concept of what a puddle was, what was going on in the weld. And so that's whenever I decided to come up with, go back to the basics, I guess you could say, and teach them oxyacetylene welding so that they could see the actual process in a little bit less stressful situation. Because whenever they start arc welding, you all know, and as the old saying goes, you can't see the forest for the trees. And whenever they strike an arc and that big bright light blows up in their face, then they don't even have a clue what they're looking at whenever they get down in there or what to find. And so I started the oxyacetylene welding process, and you wouldn't believe at how much faster, once they did learn how to strike an arc, how much faster that they did understand the process and what to do while they were welding. And simply all that I do, and I might back up just a little bit and mention something about the safety test, because I start out my students just like everybody else at the beginning of the year and teach safety. And that's one of the things, if you should really concentrate on that and be very, very diligent in making sure that those students understand proper safety practices out in the shop. And I even start right off during my lecture on safety is introduce the cutting torch quickly, because that seems like that's probably a piece of equipment that intimidates students as much as anything. And so I do it regularly and often, just so that they will get comfortable with it and understand the oxyacetylene torch, how to set it up, because there's just a multitude of things that you can teach in that process, along with safety and proper handling of that. And that way, whenever they get out in the shop, they're not near as intimidated whenever it comes time for them to demonstrate and do it. As a matter of fact, I've had some students that have left my class and quit my class and gone to another class because of the cutting torch. I mean, that was just enough to scare them off. And so I do that on purpose, not necessarily to scare them off, but just to let them know at one of the most hazardous, maybe, piece of equipment that they're going to use in the shop. But once they feel comfortable with that and they pass the test with 100%, and I make it's all or none. Everybody pass it with 100% before anybody gets to go to the shop. It's very important to me because I let the students know that if they have their back turned to old Joe across the shop, they need to make sure and feel comfortable that he knows the safety, the proper safety, and the proper way to use equipment, and they feel comfortable out in the shop with everybody they're working with. Because I'm telling you, you guys all know, if there's 15 of them out there in the shop, either welding or using the cutting torch, that's a little stressful sometimes. And I've had a wide variety of types of students out there in the shop, and it's really, really, really important that I make sure that they know exactly what I expect out of them. And that goes back to that safety test and what Rick said about expectations. They'll do exactly what you expect of them. I mean, I can just assure you that. And they will work out in the shop as hard as you do. One thing that I will not do, and probably one of the reasons why I don't, is because there's cameras out in the shop. My students will never be alone out in the shop without me. And it's very important that I'm in the middle of them so that they know that there's eyes on them all the time. And so that's just one of the things that I want to stress to everybody. You know, you just don't say, oh, go out in the shop and start welding. You say, come on out in the shop and start welding, instead of sending them out there and then going out later, because all you're doing is just inviting opportunities for students to do the wrong thing and cause you and everybody else some heartache in the end. So back to what I was talking about as far as my best practice, if you will. I started this 3 or 4 years ago, and maybe longer than that, I can't remember, but I do. And like I said, this is nothing new. This is just a simple box that I start off with. And I have the luxury of having a plasma cam. Some of you may, where I can cut out those coupons for students to have. If you don't, you can always buy different types of strap steel from your steel provider, and then just cut them up yourself and give to them if you have to. But I give them those 5 pieces of steel. And again, there's a multitude of things that you can teach right there. Rick hit on teaching a student how to grind off mill scale off of metal. They learn the difference. If they try to weld it with the mill scale on, they realize that it requires a whole lot more heat, and it's inconsistent, and it won't weld as well. Another thing is it teaches them that they need to tack their metal together, because how metal will react to heat whenever it warps or anything like that. Those are all things that they can learn by just doing that little box. And again, Randy can tell you that that's one of the first things that we learned in our shop class back 36 years ago. And I tell you, that's something that now then I go back to those basics and I realize why we were taught that way, simply because those are just some good basic things that students can learn first and will help them be more successful later on in their time in the shop. And that's just one of the small projects that I have them do. And I might go out there some of the equipment that you're going to need for that, for oxyacetylene welding. For those of you that may not know, some of you may and some of you may not, but if you buy those oxyacetylene cutting torch kits from your supplier, they will also come with welding tips. Now this is an aught tip. If you hear them say aught, that means if you look on it right here somewhere, you'll see a 0. And that's the best tip that I use to weld 10 gauge steel. I failed to tell you that I give them 5 pieces. The metal is 10 gauge, and it's not near as aggressive. I have a few of these longer number 1 tips that's a little bit more aggressive and seems to burn holes. And all I want to do is just teach the students how to fuse, just fusion welding in that process right there. And so once they see what's going on as far as the actual fusion, the puddle, and how to manipulate that puddle for welding, then they will understand it more whenever they do actually arc weld. And so that's that's the best practice that I have to get them started quicker, because I can remember just spending a lot more time than necessary just learning how to arc weld. And I think I see Cameron Dale on there. She could probably testify to that. The time that we spent out in the shop just trying to learn how to actual arc weld. And I seems like I just hear myself yelling, watch the puddle, watch the puddle, watch the puddle. And they don't ever respond back because they don't know what I'm talking about. And so now then, whenever I do this oxyacetylene welding, they know exactly what I'm saying whenever I'm talking about the puddle. And then that just seems to transition right into MIG welding as well. They know how the puddle's supposed to react with the metal, what to do, and it seems like it's something that they understand then. And I've found out that their arc welds and their MIG welds are considerably better, quicker than if I don't than before, whenever I wasn't using this type of a process. And then I might throw out there that the next thing that I do is and that is the end of the semester project, because I've already taught or we've already gone through SMAW welding and then MIG welding. And the last couple of years, I've kind of started teaching plasma cam right after Christmas. And so one of the things that I have the students do is I teach them plasma cam, and then I have them design a couple of panels of their own for something and we make just a pencil holder or a toothbrush holder, whatever they want to use it for. And that way they're applying all their skills. I'll have them, they'll do the plasma cam stuff, and then they'll do MIG on two sides, oxyacetylene weld on two sides, and then I'll have them weld the bottom with SMAW. And so that way they're using all three of the welding techniques that I have taught to the intro students at the beginning of the year or in the first semester, and it kind of gets them prepared to start on their projects that they will do the second semester, because that's one of my requirements. Is once they have learned all of the techniques and things and power tools and things that we do in the shop, their final exam is to build a project at the end of the year. I left out a couple of things, and I'm trying to hurry to get through this as efficiently as I can, Mason. But, this is actually the first thing that I teach them to oxyacetylene weld with, and how to keep that at 90 degrees like that. I have purchased several of these, just these magnetic squares. We use them for everything in the shop, but this is one of the best things that we have got, and the students can stick those magnets up in there, and they can keep that at 90 degrees and tag both ends, and that way they can keep their project that they're welding square, and try to make that box just as square as it possibly can whenever they start welding it all up. And so, like I said, I found that has been extremely beneficial for my students to do all the other two welding procedures or techniques whenever they learn that actual fusion process and how that works. And so, if anybody has any questions about that, you're welcome to text me, call me, whatever you want to do, and I'd be glad to help you out. That's
awesome.
it.
Thank you very much. That's some good information, and some ways to really approach starting students off in somewhat of a unique way, going back old school, if you will, sort of. And so I like that a lot. At this point, we are nearing the end of our 1 hour session. I want to first say thank you to our 4 presenters. I learned a lot, and I really appreciated the subjects that were brought forth today. If there is time and any of them would like to sit and respond to some of the questions, I will say we will be happy to open it up for any kind of questions that someone in the group may have. We appreciate all the participants joining in today. Before I get too far into it, I want to say in just one moment, I'm going to share in the chat, and you'll also receive a follow-up email. But we ask that every one of you that participated today, if you can, submit and take part in this Google form that we're going to share with you. And what that is a way for us to kind of evaluate how things went and be able to make improvements for all of our future virtual sessions. So I just dropped that into the chat, and you can click on that link and respond to that really quickly, and that would really help us on the STAR committee making improvements as we go forward. With that, is there any questions for our presenters? And one question I will ask, because I said I was going to, and this could be anybody that wants to respond if you have any good ideas. I know, Rick, you mentioned that you've been looking at utilizing and in the springtime utilized ICEV curriculum to try and teach virtually. But that's really the question I think is on a lot of people's minds for whatever the subject. And there's no secret it's going to be a humongous challenge for teaching ag mechanics virtually. And it's something that is a very real possibility, as we know. Does anyone have any thoughts or suggestions, even broadly, that would maybe speak to how you might approach that going into this year?
I don't really, I'm still navigating through how we're going to do this. It's just an uncharted territory, and ICV has done a great job in the last few months really trying to update their curriculum. But from what I understand, they're going to have some whiteboard sessions where we can go in and try some new stuff. The pricing has changed some. My wife sat through a workshop the other day with a sales rep, and so they're trying to come up with a program price rather than a per teacher price. So that's what we're looking at. And Mickey Burns, our rep in Oklahoma, is really good about helping us getting going and getting started with that. But I would encourage you also contact Nathan Smith at OSU that teaches ag engineering, especially for the CDE contest, as Michael had talked about earlier. He uses several different resources, and he's always adapting things, and he can kind of line you up to prepare, get you to prepare for the spring CDE contest. And there's just so many resources out there. I just think our students are going from the old textbook method, which I'm scared to get rid of, but I think we're going to have to get digital pretty quick and virtual somehow. And so I'm still trying to figure this out.
If it's, I think Rick's got a lot of good points there, and did want to throw out Nathan being a great a resource for us as well. Kenny and I both sat along with Laramie Law on the committee for the State Ag Mechanics Contest, and so if you got ideas or whatever on that, I know Nathan, when we've sat down and visited with him, he's been pretty open to how we do things and how we run this contest and make it efficient, because that's one of always the biggest hangups with this contest, because it takes the longest that day we're up there during the CDE events. My personal feeling, I talked to Kenny about this too. I teach 4 hours a shop essentially, like he does, and my first thing when I started scratching my head was, well, how relevant is a shop teacher when not all my kids in an urban area have access to welding equipment and those kind of things. And so after kind of sitting back and thinking about it, I mean, we do a lot of different ideas that are STEM related and math components and those kind of things. I was talking to Kenny about trying to invent and create somewhat of an invoice type situation for kids that wanted to build panels or different things that would be more on a digital format, and you could just go ahead and plug in different things, but teaching them those same components that are there as well. But I think a lot of challenges, like Rick said, and but just approach it from a mathematics standpoint, from geometry and algebra things, because those are some of the biggest components that we use in the agricultural education field when we talk about the STEM programs.
Very good. Yeah. I will say it's something that Kenny and I discussed even earlier this morning. We know we're going to have to be creative, all of us as teachers, and it's no different in this discipline and in this pathway with technology and ag mechanics. And so as we get more info and any resources, we'll try to share those in that ag mechanics Google Drive. One last reminder, unless there are any other questions, feel free to interrupt me, but I want to say that all of the resources as far as these PowerPoint presentations, any other useful documents, we've made those available for all of you as participants to be able to access later. And at the conclusion of this meeting, you will also receive a follow-up email that's going to include all of the information I've discussed in terms of the survey form, a link to the Google Drive folder, and that Google Drive folder will include this video recording in its completion. And so you can go and refer back to this video, anyone that's interested. The last thing I also will say is don't forget about our 3 sessions that are upcoming next week. We really appreciate our presenters. We had 4 really great subjects led by 4 really great teachers that have great experience and success in this area and getting students prepared and teaching them a lot of things. And so with that, is there any other questions? Okay, don't hesitate to reach out to these teachers. And the other point I want to make out, Cassie just shared, there's been some awesome ideas for distance learning on the for AgMech on the Ag Ed Discussion Lab on Facebook. Those of you that have Facebook accounts, Ag Education Discussion Lab is a well-ran group page that I do recommend, and there's a lot of other resources as well. And so we'll make sure and get to sharing those. But here it is. It's 2:05 on my watch, and so we're going to go ahead and close. I thank you guys again. And if you have any other questions that you need to reach out, just message me and I'll try to share that to you. So thank you again.
Thanks, Mason.